Zealand Minerals Council. Hello, Josie.
Good morning.
Good morning, Josie. We've got 15 minutes allocated for you, your time this morning. You use the beginning of it how you see fit, and we'll have some questions towards the end. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for including us. We did think it was important that we had the opportunity to make an oral submission. I'm the Chief Executive of the New Zealand Minerals Council, and we represent the mining industry. I have got my policy person coming, so he might appear at some point. I would like to just make some comments and then leave time for questions. Further to our written submission, today we would like to speak to the outcomes we would like to see from this law change, and to make it enduring and fit for purpose. And we will add a couple of points that we believe need to be highlighted. We see the role of those within Parliament is to get this right, so we won't be giving specific rewriting suggestions. I know how annoying that can be. Like many submitters, we are not sure the purpose and intent of this resource management reform have been appropriately captured yet. And this is the essential framework. There are a couple of significant flaws that impact the framework that cannot be overlooked. Firstly, we are unsure why there are two bills with two different purpose statements and a lack of integration between the two bills. This is Jeremy Harding, who's just arrived. And the second point is the national instruments, which will be drafted after the bills are passed. So submitters cannot be fully informed on many aspects of the proposed regime. So essentially, we're being asked to buy a half-finished house. It could turn out to be the home of our dreams, but equally, it could be a dodgy, leaking building that no one can live in. We are in no doubt that the existing resource management law is too risk-averse and frankly adversarial. With planning and environment law do go hand in hand, but there must be balance. And previously, the scales have tipped heavily on the environmental side and not enough on the side of overall benefits to people and the economy. The rules and guardrails of the new system need to allow for managing those tensions with evidence, science, engineering, and technology. What we would like to see from this reform is law that leaves scope for innovation, has some flexibility to facilitate the best outcomes all around, and allows for progress in building a country for the future. We believe these bills as presented are an improvement on the existing system, but it is also our view that they are perhaps designed to benefit smaller urban projects and are focused on today's housing and infrastructure issues when the legislation needs to be enduring. It must equally have provisions for the primary industries, including mining, and we have highlighted that in our written submission regarding the goals in the planning bill. We recommend that the goals be made more explicit about enabling mineral extraction. While a cookie-cutter approach will suit some areas of development at the smaller end of the scale, mines are large projects with many parts. Making some of the approvals processes more generic and easy to navigate will free up decision makers to tackle the more complex development projects, but the law also needs to allow for a holistic approach to those projects. That is why the Fast Track Approvals Act is so ideal for large projects, because it allows for a one-stop shop approach where the project can be looked at in its entirety and decisions can be made at that level. It has been proven not to be the rubber stamp that some critics said it would be. And it is why we strongly advocate for a case-by-case approach in the assessment of projects that has both enabled mining and had desirable environmental outcomes, often in partnership with government or community organisations. I'd like to make some more specific comments. The outdated Wildlife Act from 1953 is the bane of all development. With this law in the mix, lizards in this country have a better life than many people, certainly on mine sites. They get rehomed if their original home is disturbed, and they get excellent health care. I kid you not. And that's all lizards, not just ones that are threatened or might need some special treatment. Where a resource management consent is obtained that manages effects on Indigenous wildlife, there should be no need for a separate wildlife permit to be obtained for that same activity. The duplication is obvious and should be removed, and this should apply to both bills. This needs to be a certainty in the legislation and not subject to words such as may, as per clause 128 of the Natural Environment Bill, which says, quote, a natural resource permit may include a wildlife approval, end quote, without explaining when or how this might occur and the criteria that will apply. Zoning concerns us because of the unique aspects of minerals. Minerals lie where they lie, thanks to centuries of geological processes, so spatial planning carries some risk for mining. We fully support the use of mining zones, but we also believe proposed zones within regional spatial plans must not preclude mining from occurring within those zones that are not specifically designated for that purpose. This is a too prescriptive approach, and there needs to be scope for future prospecting and discovery as the world's need for minerals changes and increases. On environmental limits, many submitters have talked about these, and we will add to that. Environmental limits are a blunt instrument in a nuanced world, and we do not think they are a useful tool for managing environmental outcomes. Environmental limits do not work for mining in the way they are proposed in this legislation, and we do not support them. They may be counterproductive if they prevent the holistic assessment of an activity. There needs to be flexibility in the way environmental limits are applied. Mines employ an environmental approach that allows for the best possible outcomes by using an effects hierarchy. That starts with avoid, then moves through remedy, mitigate, offset, and where none of that is possible, compensation. The biggest threat to Indigenous biodiversity is introduced pest species and predators. Mines have a long history of spending considerable time and money and working with others to manage pests and predators and restore Indigenous flora and fauna. We have noted there are significant risks that environmental limits will end up being too stringent to be workable, thereby stifling development or making it impossible, which is not the intent of these bills. We are not asking for a lowering in standards and environmental limits. We are asking for more flexibility. Something we did not include in our written submission but would like to cover now, as it has also been raised by other submitters, is direct referrals. We do not agree with the removal of the ability for the Environment Court to consider direct referrals. We are not sure what the problem that is trying to be solved is with this removal. The process works well for smaller projects that want a quick outcome. So overall, we hope to see more explicit consideration of mining and its unique requirements in this law reform to ensure we don't sterilise any resources unintentionally. We believe the Fast Track Approvals Act 2024 has many aspects that address the complexities of large-scale projects. We would like to see some of its successful aspects, such as the one-stop shop approach of a single body being responsible for granting all of the approvals required for a single project, continued through this legislation. Thanks very much, and we're happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, we'll move straight to Priyanka.
Thank you, and thanks for your submission. I've got a question around on the point that you made around wildlife permits and the duplication there. But I also found interesting the point you made around the balance having swung too far towards environmental protection previously, given that New Zealand has the highest proportion of threatened species in the world. But that aside, we've heard from at least one submitter who has made the point that there's only been one entity who has complained of that duplication between the two permits. So I'd be keen to get a better understanding from you in terms of the number of complaints there has been around that duplication, to your knowledge. And related to that, we have also heard the concern that including a wildlife permit in a resource permit means that those in DOC who have the expertise to be able to provide that permit, councils don't have that expertise. So how do you reconcile the two?
Right, there's a lot in those questions. Duplication doesn't make any sense in law as far as we're concerned. And so with having to get a wildlife permit in one place and another place for the same project doesn't make any sense to us. So that it's that duplication that we're saying shouldn't exist, and that in resource management practice, it's one permit that you get. So we would prefer there to be one permit, and that it's part of the resource management process rather than we have to go separately to DOC again, because DOC will be consulted on the permit anyway. So it's just adding more process to a project that can be very time consuming anyway. So I don't know why you would duplicate something like that.
Is DOC always consulted in resource management permits that include a wildlife component from would they be?
I would say.
Well, I'm certainly happy the opportunity to at least make a submission.
Yeah.
We struggle to hear that, sorry. Say that again. Come close to the mic.
At least have the opportunity to make a
Can you hear that?
No.
Right.
They would at least have the opportunity to make a submission. But generally,
so
mining
it's different.
sites are big with a lot of complexities. So the mining company would be working with DOC on a number of issues anyway, particularly if it's on the DOC estate. So it's not like we're cutting DOC out or saying to cut DOC out, or we're just saying why duplicate a process. It's inefficient and it's bureaucratic.
Okay, Cameron?
Thank you, Chair. The question I have is about the expertise that goes into the spatial planning bill and the independent hearings and the people who assess resource consents. Is the Minerals Council happy with the proposals for expertise on these panels and boards and assessors? And if so, great. If not, what sort of improvements do you think we could be looking at?
Comment on that, Jeremy? I guess it's the same as what we've raised in the fast track processes. These are big complex projects, and so for everyone's benefit, it pays for there to be some expertise available to help with assessment. And in councils, in areas where there's mining, there is expertise. So the difficulty with having a bunch of people assess a project that's worth many millions of dollars is you want them to know what they're looking at. And we've found with the Fast Track Act, quite a lot of time goes into just explaining what mining is and what a mine site is, and et cetera, et cetera. So I guess for efficiency of process, the ideal scenario is that there is expertise there. Does that answer your question?
I suppose it raises it, but I'll put you on the spot there a little bit. I guess the question is, how can we what sort of changes, or what could the committee be looking at to make sure that expertise is provided to areas where applications for mining are being made, to make sure that correct decisions are being made? But yeah, I was just exploring what ideas you had on that. Well,
there's two other parts to that. There's the changes that are going to happen to local government and the national direction instruments as well. So yeah, as I say, we're sort of commenting on something that's not complete yet. So there's plenty of room for improvement. So if there is improvement, it would definitely be that there's that projects, and that wouldn't be just mining, that would be all, big construction projects and everything. You'd want some expertise in there, right?
Sure. Can I ask a sup on that, Chair?
Yes.
Yeah. So when developing national instruments and national standards, how much of a role do you think your member organisation should have in, say, national standard for mining, or I'm not sure what other industries, quarrying perhaps? How much do you think your industry should have a representation in that development?
Well, we're very much expecting to be involved in that development, and would be pretty upset if we weren't. So,
okay.
Yeah.
That's succinctly put. Appreciate it.
Okay, any last questions from members? It appears not. Thank you very much for coming before us today. We appreciate the submission you've given verbally, but also written as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Cheers.